In this video, I will go through the regional terms and directional terms to help you complete Lab 1, the language of anatomy. We'll mainly use the muscle model to help demonstrate the regional terms. There are two main divisions to the human body, the axial and appendicular. The axial is the head, the neck, and the trunk, and the appendicular are the upper and lower limbs. The axial contains the cephalic region, which is the head, and that has the frontal, the orbital, nasal, oral, mental, buccal, otic, and occipital regions. If we look at the side view, we can see that this is the anterior part of the head, and this is the posterior. Now let's look at the trunk. On the trunk, we have the thoracic and abdominopelvic regions, and then we'll look at the back. So for the thoracic, the axial part is going to be the sternum. So this is the sternal region, and it connects to the ribs here, and the ribs go back and connect to the thoracic vertebrae. So this is the sternal region. This is the pectoral region, and it has the mammary region anterior to it where the mammary gland is. This is going to attach to the upper limb and move your arm. Okay, so that's your thoracic area. This is the abdominopelvic. So we have our abdomen and our umbilical. This is the pelvic part right here. This is pelvic. And then as we move inferiorly, we go from pelvic to inguinal, which is the groin, okay, inguinal, to pubic, where the pubic bone is, and then genital. So umbilical, pelvic, inguinal, pubic, genital. If we turn the back of our muscle model and look at the trunk part, there's that, the cephalic we went over, and that's still cervical. This is the vertebral part I was talking about. That's the dorsal part of the trunk, and even the neck. So the cervical vertebrae will be in the neck, and then your trunk vertebrae will be the thoracic here, and those are what connect to the ribs. Then we have 5 lumbar down here, so this is the lumbar region. This is the sacral region because it has the sacrum here, and then the inferior most part is the coccyx. We also, looking at the back or the dorsal area, we have our scapular region, which, like the pectoral region, the scapular connect to the upper limbs and move them. So let's take a look at the upper limb now. So the upper limb is going to be the appendicular skeleton, and the regions here will be the acromion, which is where the scapula and the clavicles meet. That's the acromion. This is the deltoid, this big muscle here. That's your deltoid region. Armpits are axillary. This is the brachial, or your upper arm. This is the front of the elbow, your antecubital. The back of the elbow is the olecranon. Your forearm is the antebrachium. And then we have our wrist, which is the carpals. Our hand is the manus, and it composed of the metacarpals and the digits. We've got 5 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first digit is the thumb, and we have our palm here, the palmar region. The lower limb of the appendicular skeleton is the coxal, femoral. So both, anterior and posterior is femoral. This is our patellar, which is your kneecap. The back of the knee is popliteal. Your shin is crural. The side here, the lateral part, is fibular. And then the back, the calf, is sural. And since we're here, we'll go ahead and go down to the calcaneal, which is your, heel. The bottom part of the pedal, which is your foot, is the plantar. Your ankles will be tarsals. And then on the pedal is metatarsals. And your digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first digit is the hallux. So again, if we're looking laterally at our torso model, we see that anterior and posterior. Now a little bit on the directional terms. For a human, notice that we stand on 2 legs. We're bipedal. Remember how foot is pedal. That means foot, two feet. If you wondered why this dinosaur is here, it's because it's quadrupedal. It walks on 4 feet, okay? So this is important as far as directional terms are concerned, because for humans, all right, when we look at both of these guys, we can see that this is the anterior view and posterior. It is also the ventral and dorsal. For our dinosaur, which is not to scale, in the dinosaur, this is the anterior facing forward, just like there, see, anterior facing forward. This is the posterior, or behind. There's their posteriors, their behinds. Okay, now let's look at where the belly is. There's the belly of the dinosaur, or any 4-legged animal. The belly is facing the ground. It is not facing forward. So ventral is a little bit different here, so it's not going to be synonymous with anterior in a 4-legged animal. However, in a bipedal animal, us humans, we're the only true bipedal animal, anterior and ventral are indeed synonymous. So looking down here at our quadrupedal animal, look at the dorsal, that's the back, and then there's the posterior. So the dorsal and the posterior are not facing the same direction. The dorsal is facing upwards, the sky, superiorly almost, whereas the posterior is facing behind. In a human, our posterior is facing behind, and our back is on our behind. So that's why when you look at your directional terms, you will see that ventral and anterior are the same for human, and dorsal and posterior are the same for human. That took me a long time to figure that out. So other directional terms that you're going to see will be superior, inferior, proximal, and distal. So when we look at, when we look at our humans here, superior and inferior are generally going to refer to the actual axial part of the body, if you would. So like the head, the neck, and the trunk area. So when we say that something is superior to something else, we're usually going to be working here in this area. And when we talk about proximal and distal, we will usually be looking at the limbs or attachment points of organs, but the organs will be for Bio 169. Let's look at the attachment points for our limbs for proximal and distal. So this is the proximal part of the upper limb. This is the distal part. So the fingers, the digits, are distal to the deltoid. And then for our lower limb, this is the proximal part, so the coxal is the most proximal part, coxal. And then, of course, our digits will be distal. So the knee is proximal to the digits. And then the knee is also distal to the coxal area, or the hip. So when you are doing your exercises, whichever is the first term that you see, for instance here, the navel is inferior to the chin. Notice that we're on, that axial part of the body here. So there's the the chin and the navel, all right, or the umbilical, you know, navel is a synonym. When you see the first word, navel, that's the one that you are assessing. So you are telling me where the navel is in relationship to the chin. So here it's saying the navel is inferior to the chin. So the navel is inferior to the chin, sits below it. Okay? So remember that. Let's see what else. I've taught you about anterior and ventral, posterior and dorsal, proximal, distal, superior, inferior. Another thing you're going to see is medial and lateral. So medial is in the midline here and lateral is moving towards the side. Intermediate is between medial and lateral. So for instance, here on our quadriceps muscles, you're going to learn that this muscle here, okay, is called the vastus intermedialis. And so it is between the vastus medialis in the center, vastus medialis, and the vastus lateralis, which is on the side. So that's the vastus lateralis. Medialis, lateralis, intermedialis. Got it? And we also have superficial and deep. So superficial is towards the skin, and deep is towards the interior of the body. Last thing, using this torso model helps to visualize the dorsal and ventral again when you're learning about body cavities. So this is the sagittal view. So we're looking at the side. So basically what the sagittal does is it cuts the body into right and left halves. So anytime we look at the side of a specimen, it's sagittal. So even when we're looking at our Brontosaurus, that's sagittal there. And we can see clearly in our torso model the dorsal and ventral. In our dinosaur, we got dorsal and ventral. And so this is our dorsal body cavities, which is going to have our brain and our spinal cord. So this would be his dorsal body cavity. There's be a little dino brain and then there's long spinal cord. And then we have our ventral body cavities, which are going to be belly side, and they're going to include our thoracic and our abdominopelvic cavities. All right, so it's belly side. So we're going to call it the ventral body cavity, and thoracic and abdominopelvic. So if we were looking at our dinosaur, this would be his ventral body cavities. Because see where this would be his thoracic here, that'd be where his heart and lungs are, and then there's his belly where his intestines and guts and stuff are, okay? So that's why we call this the dorsal body cavity and the ventral body cavity, because it doesn't matter if you're a dinosaur or human, that's your dorsal and ventral. So when will we use anterior versus posterior? The main thing that we're gonna see it in is when we start looking at where organs are. So when you look here at the heart, this is the anterior view of the heart, okay? So when you learn about the heart, that's what you're gonna learn a lot of, is anterior. And the heart is also like anterior to the spinal cord. So it lies in front of. And earlier, well, I was doing the torso model and fetal pig dissections for you, and I said that the esophagus is posterior to the trachea. So it's behind it. So generally when we're looking at the arrangement of our organs, in relation to each other, and also like what side of the organ we're looking at, we're going to use anterior and posterior. But then when we're using, whether we're moving or talking about the dorsal body cavities or ventral body cavities, we'll be specifically referring to our back side or the belly side. So I hope that clears up some of these particular terms. Just remember when you're doing your worksheet, whatever the organ is that they're asking about is the one that you are describing its location to the second one. So here the knee is distal to the thigh. So if you look here, this is the thigh or the femoral, right? And then this is the knee. So the knee is down here the thigh is right here. So the knee is distal to the thigh because the knee is closer to the digits, or the end of the leg, basically, the distalmost part of the leg, than the thigh is. So I hope that that helps. That's the part that students have the most trouble with. As far as regional terms, you tend to catch on to that pretty easily. Just remember, this is your axial here, and this is your appendicular. They will put these regions just kind of in the thoracic. Just know that, you know, the thoracic and is going to contain both axial and appendicular components to it. And then like the gluteal, see, they have it pretty much just listed as part of that lower limb, the gluteal here. So that's not a problem there. The lower limbs are pretty much separated from the trunk, but the axial and the appendicular, when you're talking about the pectoral girdle, it's a little bit more overlapping. So don't, you know, get too crazy in the details. As we go through the skeleton and muscles, it'll become more apparent what's axial versus appendicular. But the take-home message is clearly the axial muscles and bones will be moving different parts of the body, the head, neck, and the trunk, and then the appendicular bones and muscles are focused on moving the upper and lower limbs. So, all right, y'all.